Gracias, Julio. Hola. Buenas tardes. That's all the Spanish I know, so apologies that this will be in English. You have to change slides? Okay. Thank you for joining us after lunch. Thank you, CANACERO, for having me. Adriana and I speak. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm based in the United States. I work out of Pittsburgh, and my main focuses are covering steel scrap and the U.S. steel market as a whole. Anytime you're talking about scrap in the United States, you're talking about a global commodity with kind of international pulls. So it's quite interesting. So today I'll kind of give a brief global overview, talk a little bit about trade because it's kind of inevitable not to, and focus on some trends that are happening out there. So we had World Steel was last week in Tokyo. Some of my colleagues had attended. These were some of the major storylines, some of our headlines that came from the conference. A few of the things that jump out to me include the comment on China, how their steel demand is expected to, kind of reach a peak. And any time steel demand growth stalls in China, it's always cause for concern. Because obviously they make a lot of steel, and whenever the growth stops, what will they do with that steel? But in 2017, we saw China produce 6% more steel, but export 31% less. And then this year so far, we've seen it produce another 6% more, but export 11% less. So I think that was a welcome sight for the industry. One of the, a lot of bright spots up there. Turkey is an exception. They're expected to have some steel demand issues there this year. There's currency issues, the political climate. I know you guys are upset about the 25% tariff, but imagine Turkey, it's a 50% tariff. So, they're dealing with that right now. So global steel demand, you can see the world numbers trending higher. And you can see the interesting thing, China's stalling out. These are world steel projections here. India's growing, and at the same time, Japan, who's the second largest steel producer, has sort of stalled out too. And I think that could be kind of interesting as we see who will become that growing steel market now that we've seen China kind of plateau and Japan do as well. So here's a snapshot from 2007, the top row, and 2018 in the bottom row. This is just steel demand, not production, steel demand. So you can see China's retained the top spot, but the tonnage has increased significantly. India is moving up there. You can kind of see Japan falling back a little bit, South Korea falling back a little bit, Mexico emerging as number 9 here, and Turkey moving from 10 to 8, and a little fallback from Italy. So you can see a lot of the positionings haven't changed too much, but in terms of the actual tonnage, we've seen some drastic increases, and even in some cases on a percentage basis, especially Italy, some decreases in their steel demand. So going back to Japan and India, we could see clearly the trend moving on. Japan producing, not that it's falling off much, but it's sort of peaked and plateaued and eroded a little bit, all the while India is increasing significantly. I think, demographics I've always kind of been interested in. Obviously, we know the massive population in India. One metric that I've been really interested in since I found out it existed is steel use per capita, and World Steel calculates that. And it really goes to show just how different markets could be in terms of their steel intensity. You have 1.3 billion people, but if the average per capita use of steel is as low as India, you're going to be hard pressed. But what that shows me when I see a population so high and a steel use per capita so low, there's the potential to increase your steel production for your domestic population is quite significant. So Japan has been kind of able to produce this much steel because their population isn't there. They've been able to export a lot. India is looking to grow their steel production for the domestic market. And this brings up, a big question now. It's easy to see what's going to happen with India, but the question now is how are they going to go about making this steel? I think a lot of people are interested in it. I was at a coal conference a few weeks ago, and everybody there was fairly certain that India would move towards blast furnaces, and because by coking coal, they have some iron ore, they produce steel that way. There's concerns about the electrical grid in India, so maybe the EAF route is not for them. But when you're looking at possibly the biggest potential in terms of steel demand, you're looking at India, and it seems to be the blast furnace route is what they're going to take. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago. It had nothing to do with steel, but one of the speakers had mentioned this. Demographics are more predictable than technology, and I really think that applies to steel. Whenever you're trying to figure out where the steel demand is going to come, it's obvious to see. You look at populations, you look at steel use per capita, you look at the economy, the GDP, etc. You know where all the raw materials are, whether it be scrap or raw materials in the ground like iron ore or coal. The tough thing to do is figure out which technology that particular country is going to do. We know who needs steel, we just don't know exactly how they're going to go about producing it. So in the United States, it's such a scrap-driven market that sometimes people lose sight that we're one of the exceptions, not the rule. You could see Japan, 76% blast. We know China's almost all blast furnace. Japan, 76%. Russia and South Korea, 67%. Germany, 71%. Brazil, for obvious reasons, with all their iron ore, 78% blast furnace. And that's why the Turkish market and the U.S. market are so closely aligned, because we're so similar. Turkey's a major longs product producer, which is a little different than us, but Turkey 69% EAF, United States 68% EAF. So you see naturally some similarities right there. Taiwan is 61% blast furnace, and that's our third largest scrap buyer. So it was kind of interesting to see that they still have quite a large capacity of blast furnaces. Iran and India are kind of outliers there. Iran 90% EAF, India a little more, but you have to realize India and Iran make 22 and 20 million tons of DRI in their market a year. The next closest is Russia at 7 million. So India and Iran, yes, technically it's EAF, but it's kind of a totally different way they go about the market. They don't need that much scrap. So these are recently revised figures. This is for the first half of 2018, your steel scrap consumption. And then on the right, your crude steel production. So China, of course, how can a country that has 95% blast furnace production consume that much scrap? It just kind of goes to show just how large their capacity is. So even though that's mostly blast furnace predicated, the little scrap they were using, there was estimates a couple years ago they were using 6%, 7%, maybe even 10% of scrap in the integrated steelmaking route. There's recent reports now that that's up to 20, 25%. If that ends up being true across the whole market, you're talking about a significant amount of scrap demand within China. So right now they're on pace for 175 million tons of scrap consumption this year, which Peter Marcus did a great job earlier today, and that's literally the figure. He said that the China domestic scrap reservoir is headed towards 175 million tons of scrap. So for the past decade in the scrap market, the big concern was what's going to happen when China starts exporting scrap. A lot of people were very, very worried about that. And I think in the near term, the concern might be shifting more towards iron ore. If China does in fact utilize the scrap reservoir, they have the 40% export tax. Let's control raw material here. It's cleaner, a number of different reasons. Now, if it does, the reservoir balloons to 400 million tons, which people have estimated way down the road, and then that will create a whole nother issue for the market. But in the short term, it seems that China, if they're going to shift their technology a little bit, it's going to be at the cost of iron ore rather than scrap. The EU 28, obviously, but just in terms of single countries, you have the US next, a massive scrap consumer. And then if you look at the steel scrap consumption percentage growth, and then you look at the crude steel production growth, anytime obviously you see scrap consumption increasing at a higher clip than global steel, or the country's steel production, you can see what's going on. Either they're building more EAFs or they're using more scrap in the blast furnace, which clearly seems to be the case in China. Mexico is learning this now. They're learning this international scrap market, the different, the tendencies and where to go find this scrap. They've increased their scrap imports. 2017 came off a little bit though, but these are drastically up from 2013 and 2014. 2011, they were importing 700,000 tons of scrap. That's increased now, so they're on pace for 2 million tons. So quite the growth there, plus obviously a growing scrap reservoir here in Mexico too they can rely on. The U.S. is the world's largest scrap exporter, and you can see the markets here. Turkey is our largest buyer. That's pretty set in stone, fairly consistent. They're there in the blue. The thing to keep an eye on is Mexico's growth compared to Taiwan. So Mexico they've unseated Taiwan as the second largest buyer of our scrap. Why that's important is because Taiwan would buy from our west coast, whereas Mexico buys from our east coast. So now Mexico and Turkey are going head to head, competing for the same scrap. Some of the other markets you see over there are Bangladesh. We'll talk about them a little bit more. China tonnage has fallen off quite significantly. And obviously the proximity of Canada lends in there too. South Korea is an interesting one. South Korea was number 3. It was Turkey, Taiwan, and South Korea for pretty much this whole decade. And South Korea has really fallen off in terms of buying U.S. scrap. So one of the tough things that kind of, people have trouble wrapping their head around when talking about scrap is why is Turkey so influential? I mean, what other commodity can you name in the world that people wake up and look at Turkey to set the price? It's, I don't know, I'm not sure if there is another one. If there is, it's maybe something agricultural. But the location of Turkey, and once you consider deep sea freight routes from the United States, so the United States exports a majority of our East Coast scrap comes out of the Northeast. So Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland. That's where our scrap is generated, that's where our big population centers are, and that's where our scrap is exported. So from the Northeast, those states there in the red, United States, to Turkey is $26 a ton today for a 40,000 ton vessel. To go to Greece, to go to Mexico, to go to Peru, to go to Brazil, very comparable numbers, if not the same. There would be, no one would expect a premium or a discount if you're a mill in Greece, if you're a mill in Egypt, if you're a mill in Mexico. All about who's willing to pay more. There's really, maybe there's some preferences when it comes to things like LC and on discharge and things like that, but for the market, Turkey is no longer alone. So anytime a country wants to increase its EAF production and they don't have a big reservoir of scrap, which very few countries do, they're going to have to start learning these dynamics that these pools are coming from different areas. So and Mexico is doing that right now. We can see these are some Mexico bulk scrap imports in the United States. This is just this year, and if anybody follows the Turkish scrap market closely, these will look very familiar. These are exactly the kind of cargoes Turkey buys every day. Buying from Providence, a mix of shred, plate structural HMS. This is a cargo that a Turkish mill would want. There is no difference at all, the tonnage, the grades, the breakdown. So Mexico and Turkey are going head to head for these cargoes. And another thing, I go back here, on the other slide was the fact that everyone wonders, well, how can all these countries buy our scrap? Don't the U.S. mills want the scrap too? We'll go over the grade by grade difference in a minute, but you also have to think where the United States steel mills are located. Our steel mills are typically in the Midwest or the Southeast. They're not near the coast. In Turkey, the mills are on the coast. In the United States, they're not. So, say a steel mill in the Southeast of the United States needs to buy scrap from New York or the Northeast. It's going to be, assuming you get rail cars, which is a massive, massive issue in the United States, it's going to be about $40 to $60 to get the scrap from the Northeast to bring it to the Southeast. Whereas, as I said, Turkey can buy that for $26. So deep sea freight fluctuates. It's typically cheap. Inland freight, in the United States especially, does not fluctuate. It's always expensive, and the logistics are very difficult because of trucking shortages, rail car availability, etc. So back to the point here. This is what Mexico's buying from the U.S. There's a couple other more recent ones. In May, they got a bulk cargo from Norfolk, that's Sims Metal Management there. In July, they bought a bulk cargo from New York City. Again, they were in the market buying with Turkey for this material. So again, not to downplay the Turkey's significance when it comes to U.S. scrap, but they are a major, major player when it comes to buying our scrap. But Mexico has made significant inroads. The other countries look small, but collectively that adds up. If you consider countries like Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Egypt, these are all over 500,000 tons a year of scrap. Even Peru, 250,000 tons a year, just buying U.S. scrap. Ecuador, 133,000 tons of scrap. So there are, a part of this is a concerted effort by U.S. suppliers who, for years, they were kind of annoyed negotiating with the Turkish mills who always seemed to come to the market at once and then kind of leave the market at once. So they kind of wanted to, spread out their options and kind of diversify their buying portfolio. But what are the grades of scrap the U.S. is exporting? So it's kind of heavy loading scrap, shredded scrap, plate, and structural. These are obsolete grades of scrap. So you can kind of see what's going on. We're getting rid of the obsolete grades. And again, why does the U.S., China has more scrap than we do, sure, but we're not too far behind. And we have less than 5% of the world's population, but we have around a quarter of the world's GDP. And that's really how scrap is generated. Scrap and GDP correlate closely. And we don't hold on to our cars very long. We don't hold on to our appliances very long. So all of this kind of goes hand in hand to generating scrap. So even though our population lags far behind China and India, the fact that the GDP being where it is, the economy being where it is, and such an old economy, an established economy, scrap continues to generate more to the point that it has to leave the shores. Even the fact that we have an entire steel industry predicated on EAF production. But again, it's not a one-for-one. It's HMS is leaving, shred's leaving, plate structure is leaving. And what are we bringing in? We're bringing in prime scrap. That's what the bundles are. And shred is coming in also to help fill out the cargo, but primarily what U.S. steel mills want is prime scrap. And some of the export decline we saw on the last slide and the import increase we're seeing now has to do with the strong U.S. dollar. It makes more sense for us to import raw materials. But it also has to do with the way we're making steel, what steel we're making. We're making steel in an electric arc furnace, and we're making a lot of light flat rolled steel. That kind of differentiates us a little bit from Turkey. So we don't need the heavy melting scrap grades. What we need is the clean scrap. I think one of the biggest issues facing U.S. mills is the availability of prime scrap in the future. Prime scrap is generated through manufacturing, automotive production. We're losing a lot of manufacturing, we're losing a lot of automotive production, so that scrap is getting generated elsewhere. Also, automotive producers, for example, are getting very efficient with what they do. Nucor, for example, said they used to send a coil to Ford. Ford would send 30% of that scrap back to Nucor after they were done stamping and cutting everything. That totals down to 20% this year. And scrap, by nature, because it's recyclable, the copper content continues to increase. So copper is one of the biggest detriments facing these EAF steel mill producers. So this is something that they're aware of. That's why we're seeing DRI investment. That's why we're seeing HBI investment. And that's why we're seeing imports coming from Europe. So think, for example, the U.S. is always seen as a scrap exporter, but think about some of these European countries. They have massive automotive facilities, manufacturing facilities, like the United Kingdom, Sweden, Netherlands, but they don't make much steel over there. So it's kind of a natural flow of scrap. And again, take into account the freight rates. If it's $26 to send our HMS to Turkey, it's very similar to send bundles from the UK into the Gulf of Mexico. So just to visualize it one more time, again, the obsolete scrap is leaving, the prime scrap is coming in. It's, it makes perfect sense, and the EAFs are really taking advantage of it. And there's different things they can do to kind of influence the respective markets. When people hear about a vessel of prime scrap coming in, domestic suppliers certainly get a little concerned. Pig iron's another one. This is something else, strong US dollar, it makes sense to import, and we're importing pig iron. We're going back to 2006 levels, last time we were at 5 million tons. Things have changed quite significantly. Since we were last a massive pig iron importer, Russia has kind of superseded. Russia and Ukraine have sort of unseated Brazil. The north of Brazil had many, many issues facing them, and CIS producers came in and kind of took that market away from them. So this is another effort by steel mills to control their scrap costs in the United States and also impact the copper levels. Example, with pig iron you can use more shred in lieu of bundles. So they're certainly not standing still and just paying whatever it is to get prime scrap. They're certainly getting creative. These are our DR grade imports. So the import code is a little confusing because it includes HBI, it includes DRI, and it also includes DR grade pellets that voestalpine and Corpus Christi, Texas requires. So the Trinidad flow has been consistent. Nucor runs the DRI facility in Trinidad, and that comes to Nucor. It's not a merchant product. It's made for them, and they consume it. The new trend we're seeing is the Brazil DR grade. Those are pellets from Brazil going to Texas to make HBI. The Venezuela market has been decimated. We've all heard that story. So again, this is just one more way the United States mills are getting creative and not relying on domestic scrap and paint or whatever. They're doing their best to control their costs, but also control their mix, because not that we're a niche producer of steel, but steel mills have moved up the value chain. It's tough to see that going the other way anytime soon. They're trying to make lighter, flat-rolled steel, fewer raw materials, more processing, more profit. and DR grade exports. This is kind of a new statistic because this would only be HBI leaving Texas. 3 of the major Mexican mills have offtake agreements with voestalpine in Texas to buy their HBI. We're also seeing the tonnage to Algeria and Slovenia. Austria is landlocked, so that's where voestalpine's 2 blast furnaces are. So it technically goes through Slovenia just to get to the mill in Austria. So that's a little deceiving there. But you see Mexico is buying this HBI too, and some of it stays in the United States also. So it's a 2 million ton facility. Let's say 1 million back to Austria, then 1 million split between Mexico and the United States. And again, this is just one of the points. It's kind of out there, but that little green dot is a country called Bangladesh, and then you see Russia. Bangladesh has more people than Russia. Look at the size. And then if you're looking at a country like Bangladesh that wants to be a big steel producer, it's sort of a pick your poison. They don't have iron ore, they don't have scrap. So they had one or the other. Russia was an obvious decision. Let's go ahead and make it with the blast furnace because we have all the raw materials here. Bangladesh did not, so they made an effort, okay, we're gonna make EAFs. They have 100% EAF in Bangladesh. Look at their steel use per capita. Very, very minimal, but a massive, one of the most densely populated major country in the world. And this is just another example how a country like Bangladesh can emerge out of nowhere, then all of a sudden, there's a market. US scrap to Bangladesh wasn't there a few years ago, and now they're ranking in the top 10 of our largest buyers. And just some other interesting ones, just to show how much it could vary. If anybody's been to Dubai, you certainly can believe that UAE number. It's just not a lot of people there, a lot of massive buildings that obviously require steel. But then you see India, a country of the second largest country in the world, and they're comparable to a country like Ghana in terms of how steel intensive their economy is. Just an interesting metric, I think, when people look at trends down the road. This is something I kind of always look to see potential and maybe even see if the country is kind of oversupplied. Now on the trade. I know we have a lot of trade discussion earlier and some after this, so I didn't want to take too much time, and it's difficult to talk about the U.S. market and not mention trade. I think one of the big things lost in a lot of the trade discussions are just how successful U.S. mills have been, underneath the Trump administration when it comes to favorable rulings. So here's a timeline. You could see once they went through the investigation, things started to move pretty rapidly. I'm sure a lot of people here can remember some of these specific days like it was yesterday, whether you found out about it on Twitter or just turning on the TV. This was a very fluid process this summer. New rulings coming down, clear winners and losers all along the way. And again, just more, country by country, every day it was something, just when you think, there's a country that we had a favorable economic relationship with, maybe not anymore. It's kind of just a different rule book out there, and we could see how things can change in, the blink of an eye or the send of a tweet. So the Turkish situation has been, particularly volatile because not only do we rely on Turkey to kind of buy our scrap, but they're an international market for rebar, for finished product rebar, and for scrap. So they play a role in both hands. So this is another example of, the U.S. mills really getting the benefit of the doubt here. So whenever we put a 50% tariff on Turkish rebar, all of a sudden that's less rebar coming to the U.S., and now all of a sudden they can't afford our scrap. So that's more scrap staying in the United States. So the raw materials are going down, all while keeping more rebar out. So kind of, a double win for the steel mills. Some more in Section 232. I know it's been said a lot, but it's really tough to downplay just how significant this is, and not that anybody needs to be reminded about that. Here's, U.S., Canada, and Mexico in particular. A lot of people, question why we went after our former NAFTA partners. And clearly, the concern about 232 with the steel mills was it getting watered down. So you could see whenever prices start to erode, people thought 232 was getting watered down because of exemptions. If you were to exempt Mexico and Canada, that's significantly watering it down. The amount of steel Canada, this is just sheet. In 2015, Canada was 18% of our imported sheet market. Mexico was 6%. This 2018 year to date, just through the first 8 months, Canada is now 31% of our imported sheet market. Mexico is 9%. That's 40% of our sheet imports. If you would exempt those, I'm sure the steel mills are like, what's the point of even having 232 at this point? And put it in tonnage perspective, Canada has sent 2.9 million tons of sheet, just sheet that we're talking here. In Mexico, 856,000 tons. The United States has 167 trade remedies in place for steel. Mexico has 31 for comparison. There was a very interesting analysis in the Wall Street Journal today showing, again, just how successful steel mills have been. There's an exemption process since the Chinese tariffs came online. The SMA, which is the EAF sort of lobbying part of the United States, they filed petitions for 132 products in China. 132, so these could be chemicals needed in the steelmaking process, other raw materials. They were successful in exactly half of those, 66. So 66 of 132. For comparison, the retail federation, that's your Walmarts, your Amazons, they applied for 1,200, they got 48. Restaurant Association applied for 563, they got 14. The home builders, 497 requests, they got 2. Consumer technology, 400, companies like IBM, Samsung, they got 10. So on a percentage basis, consumer tech, 2% success. Retail, 4%. Restaurant, 2%. Home builders, 0.04%, less than 0.5%. Steel, 50%. In Steel Manufacturing Association, they were quoting the article and they said this is no favoritism, this is hard work. And that's just one way that steel mills have been able to be successful. And in the other aspect, and this is more inclined towards the EAF producers than anybody, there's been no talk of a tariff on scrap imports. I'm not sure people realize the U.S. is importing over 5 million tons of scrap, which is essentially like slab almost. And slab is front and center in all these disputes. And no discussion at all of pig iron. And Russia is our biggest supplier of pig iron. That would be an easy one to go after, especially Russia now has 51% of our market share of imported pig iron. And as far as I've heard, the subject was never even brought up. And this is directly related to 232. So you have Russia and Ukraine are going to have a tougher time sending finished steel to the United States. So they're probably thinking, well, why don't we just divert our tonnage and make pig iron and sell that? There's no tariff on pig iron. And again, the EAFs are the only ones that buy merchant deep sea pig iron in the United States. This was just last week. We had our third quarter conference calls. Nucor and Steel Dynamics going the same day. Everybody knows the United States needs to import steel, but it's rarely laid out quite like this. Mr. Miller, the CEO of SDI, Mr. Ferriola, the CEO of Nucor, they were pretty blatant. Yeah, we need imports. We're going to be a steel short market. And of course, they had their percentages there. The other thing with, Mexico and Canada, they appear in all the top list of all the products. So think of flat roll. Canada, 1, South Korea, 2, Mexico, 3. Longs, Canada, Japan, Turkey, Mexico. Pipe and tube, South Korea, Canada, Mexico. Semis, Brazil, Russia, Mexico. It's not just related to one product, it's sort of in which you would expect based on the proximity. So our imports the one that always interests me is net imports, because we don't export a lot of steel. Look at the United States, look how much steel we're importing on a net basis. We're comparable with Southeast Asian countries. What other list could you see? The United States won, and Thailand, Vietnam, and then Indonesia behind them. And of course the EU is a bloc of 28 countries. So the steel import, the volume is significant, but the market share is something of keen interest. So if they get that to 20%, which they have, I think that'd be, that's a win for the steel mills. If you include semis, that's 30%. However, that is down from a few years ago and it was 34%. So these little percentages in a major market like the United States certainly add up. And what are we bringing in? Flat roll. It's a flat roll kind of driven market, and that's what we're bringing in a lot of. Again, no surprise there. Canada, Brazil, Mexico, such a large percentage of the imports. Yeah, we buy from 85 countries. I'm not sure exactly how it possibly, can't name half of them, but the tonnage, if you're just looking at tonnage, it's the proximity will win out at the end of the day. Capacity utilization, when President Trump first announced Section 232, He said for the steel mills, our goal is to get to 80% capacity utilization. That was the stated goal. It took us a while to get there, but the steel mills' margins were through the roof, so I don't think they were complaining about 75% at all. But we're there now. 2 weeks in a row, we've been at 80%. First time that's happened since 2012. But it's not, you know, once you dive into the numbers, you can really see the ones who are betting. Nucor and SDI, if you look at their shipments, their capacity kind of deduced, they're in the 90%. So whenever this number is 80%, how can you be 80%? You know, these mini mills are running gangbusters right now, and you could see where the weakness is: long products and the blast furnace producers. The concern now, just 2 weeks ago, Credit Suisse downgraded the entire U.S. steel industry. The concern is that the steel mills are giving it away too quickly. They're making all this money and announcing all these expansions. You know, I don't know if anybody really thinks we need 9 to 11 million extra tons. This is just HRC. So there's certain concern about overcapacity. It hasn't even been a full 2 years yet, and already all these are coming online. And as many people believe, 232 is far from set in stone. And some of these investments and capital expenditures are set in stone. And the longs expansion too, it's only about 1.9 million, but I think more people are even scratching their head over that. Does the United States really need that much more rebar capacity, wire rod? Georgetown in South Carolina has brought wire rod on. Micro mills is a new trend in the United States. That's about 250,000 tons a year mill that's producing rebar just for their local market. So CMC is one in Arizona and Oklahoma. Nucor has announced one in Missouri and Florida. And the similarities is you're typically import insulated areas. So the goal, the late John Correnti always said with micro mills, he thought it was the way of the future. If you could source your scrap from 200-mile radius and send your rebar to a 300-mile radius, it could work. And this directly goes to the fact that, you know, trucking is very difficult in the U.S. So if you cannot rely on trucks, you just need short distance hauls for your scrap and for your rebar. So just another trend, but, you know, without an infrastructure bill, a lot of people are sort of wondering, do we need all this expansion, and will these mill margins, you know, hurt because of it? And here are the mill margins. This goes all the way back to pre-crisis. So Section 232 has single-handedly brought United States steel mills profitability. So the bar chart is HRC minus shredded scrap. They have brought U.S. steel mill profitability back to pre-crisis levels with the signing of a few documents. It's, you know, a lot of people, that's no minor miracle right there. You could see that the $500, I mean, this is the last couple of years when, you know, things weren't great, but people were making money and they went and almost doubled those profits. And a lot of credit needs to be given to the steel mills. They did a lot of investment in the downturn. Last time we were in a boom time, pre-crisis, so 07, Nucor did not own a scrap company. SDI did not own a scrap company. They've since spent over billions of dollars to acquire DJJ and OmniSource. DRI didn't exist in 2006, 7, 8. That's 2.5 million tons in Louisiana that was not there before. That helps you offset, that lower your scrap needs. HBI, 2 million tons, that wasn't there. Scrap imports, record high. Pig iron imports, record high, no tariff. And there's been mill consolidation. Scrap market is not good at consolidating. They just grow and grow and grow. There's very little barrier to entry to get into the scrap market, considerable barrier to entry to get into the steel market. All right, that's all for me. I just wanted to thank you for your attention, and you know, I'll be happy to answer questions, but first I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Adriana, and she's going to talk a little rebar. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos, gracias CANACERO por la invitación. Es con mucho gusto que vengo a platicar con ustedes acerca del lanzamiento del INSI Plus para la varilla mexicana. Ups. No funciona. Aquí. Muy bien. Bueno, vengo a hablar un poquito de nuestro índice para la varilla mexicana, que es un un logro de Platts con la industria de México. Y antes de hablar un poquito acerca del índice, cómo él funciona, cómo fue su concepción, voy a hablar rápidamente de nuestra actuación de Platts en Latinoamérica y después un poco más de la metodología aplicada para el índice. Bueno, nuestra cobertura de Latinoamérica es centralizada en São Paulo, Brasil, donde está ubicado nuestro equipo editorial. Esta es la razón porque yo les platico con este hermoso portuñol. Estamos ahí ubicados en São Paulo y desde São Paulo estamos monitoreando todos los países de Latinoamérica, pero tenemos evaluaciones de precios solo para algunos países en especial. Bueno, lo que hacemos en Platts. Platts es el líder de precios de referencia, análisis de mercado y noticias de mercados de commodities, y desde hace 100 años Platts está ahí objetivando traer más transparencia en los mercados. Empezó con los mercados de petróleo y hacia más reciente a los mercados de metales y otros de energía, agricultura y entre otros segmentos. En Latinoamérica somos responsables por más de 20 evaluaciones de precios en Brasil, México, Argentina y Venezuela, aunque no tenemos evaluaciones de precios para los demás países de la región. Sí estamos diariamente monitoreando la oferta, demanda, importación, exportación, todo lo que se pasa con esos países a respecto de la industria de acero y otros metales también, pero la decisión de empezar una encuesta de precios, de monitorear los precios de acero en determinado mercado o producto, parte de la industria y no de Platts. Es necesario que la industria nos demuestre una necesidad para ahí empezarnos una investigación. Bueno, en México estamos desde 2010 haciendo el monitoreo de los aceros planos y largos, en particular para el laminado caliente, el laminado frío y la varilla. Y bueno, lo que pasó en estos últimos años es que estamos ahí monitoreando estos mercados, estos productos, y tras consultar con la industria en marzo de este año, llegamos a la conclusión que para tener un monitoreo más efectivo, más fuerte en México, tendríamos que hacer algunos cambios. Bueno, la opción que tuvimos con la industria, que recogemos con la industria, es de que nuestra encuesta, que ya es hecha desde 2010, como les dijo, podría ser un poco mejorada con el lanzamiento del índice base 100. Entonces ahí no manejaríamos números absolutos, precios absolutos del acero, y ahí sería más fácil para la industria referenciar sus contratos y todo más. Lo que pasó también, lo que fue sugerido por la industria, es que esta encuesta que ya hacemos para el mercado debería ser más recurrente. O sea, nuestra encuesta era mensual, entonces recogíamos a la industria por todo el mes y al final del mes publicábamos una media mensual. No me gusta hablar de media mensual, pero voy a explicar más adelante lo que Platts entiende que sea mejor para llamar las evaluaciones. Pero bien, como he mencionado, la industria cobró un Platts más cerca del mercado. Entonces, además de indicar la necesidad del índice, indicaron también la necesidad del monitoreo semanal de la industria. Entonces, lo que empezamos el 14 de septiembre de este año fue monitorear las transacciones de compra y venta de la varilla en México semanalmente, y ahí, después de una recolección de un mes y la publicación de una media mensual, lanzaríamos el primer índice base 100 envasado en la encuesta semanal. Bueno, toda la discusión acerca del INSI fue con la industria, entonces no fue una posición desde Platts, fue una demanda de la industria para facilitar su uso como referencia contractual y no podemos olvidar, es totalmente derivado de la encuesta de la evaluación de precios existente. Como el INSE es un desdobramiento de la evaluación existente, las especificaciones que seguimos cuando estamos ahí contactando a los participantes del mercado son las mismas, reflejan las especificaciones de la evaluación. Siempre en Platts detallamos las especificaciones del producto que estamos buscando, monitoreando para cerrar el escopo y así evitar las distorsiones de precios. Entonces, estas son las especificaciones que seguimos para el mercado de Bari en México. Por ejemplo, lo que me preguntan siempre es que, bueno, la ubicación entregado noreste. Entonces, no considera cualquier transacción que sea entregado en otra parte de México a depender si esta transacción si equivale a las demás especificaciones y si no trae distorsiones a los precios que recogemos a lo largo de la semana. Aquí solo para demostrar la concepción del INSI, es una fórmula básica, ¿sí?, para la creación de un INSI base 100. Y la gran cuestión también durante la concepción y la discusión con la industria desde marzo fue qué dato base consideraríamos para el INSI. Bueno, para la concepción del INSI normalmente nos consideraríamos un periodo típico del mercado con normalidad y siempre tendíamos a captar el primer día del año o algo así, pero el inicio de este año de 2018 estaba un poco distinto de los demás, muchos factores, ¿sí?, pesando en la industria. Entonces la decisión fue buscar un otro periodo más típico, más normal, y ahí consideramos enero de 2017. Y para fornecer un histórico justo de este índice, calculamos retroactivamente todo el INSI hacia enero de 2017. Entonces, si se manejan a los datos de Platts, tendrás ahí en manos todo el histórico del INSI desde enero de 2017. Y los datos base 100 que consideramos es 11.500 pesos, que fue nuestra media mensual de este periodo. Aquí solo para mostrar también cómo el INSI desarrolló, ¿sí?, desde enero, si consideramos todo este cálculo retroactivo. Y bueno, es interesante mirar los últimos datos que tenemos. Durante el lanzamiento, el 1 de octubre, nuestro índice cerró al 124.24, que es decir, un incremento de 24% en comparación con la fecha base del índice. Bueno, si comparamos, si hacemos una comparación anualizada de septiembre de 2017 hacia septiembre de 2018, tendremos un incremento de más o menos 29.8%, si no me equivoco, y desde el inicio de año nuestro índice presenta un incremento de 14%. Si mirar los números absolutos de nuestra encuesta en pesos por toneladas, vas a tener el mismo percentual de cambio. Sí, sigues la media mensual de nuestra encuesta. Aquí solo para explicar un poco más cómo Platts y la industria en general define estos precios referencia. Consideramos que hay 3 niveles de precios referencias en la industria y vamos a empezar con los benchmarks, que son el nivel más alto. Bueno, los benchmarks son los indicadores que están ya reconocidos por la industria, en que hay un nivel de transparencia del mercado, un nivel muy grande de transparencia del mercado, en que las compañías comparten sus informaciones con Platts y todas las especificaciones necesarias. Potenciales benchmarks son como el índice que ya lanzamos, que tiene una demanda de la industria, ya logramos un nivel de transparencia muy fuerte, pero aún necesitamos lograr más transparencia, más informaciones precisas para que así logremos un indicador que reflejan las transacciones nacionales. Los precios de referencia son generalmente indicadores nuevos que están ahí testando el mercado, que el mercado está testando y que se espera convertir en un potencial benchmark o un benchmark. Bueno, Platts benchmarks están ahí en el mercado para neutralizar las distorsiones que existen en las transacciones y maximizar la transparencia. La utilización en el mercado físico es básicamente referencia en negociaciones de precios, rastrear el rendimiento frente al mercado para una evaluación comparativa y también para cerrar acuerdos de precios vinculados al índice. También se puede utilizar los benchmarks para negociar instrumentos financieros o para establecer precios futuros. Aquí solo también para demostrar cómo nuestra metodología es estándar a nivel global. Entonces la metodología que aplicamos aquí en Latinoamérica es la misma aplicada en Estados Unidos, la misma en Asia o en Europa. Lo que manejamos en Platts es mirar el mercado spot a vista y aunque sea la menor parte de la industria, es la que determina si los contratos, los precios futuros y también por ahí que se establecen las negociaciones de instrumentos financieros. Y cuando miramos el mercado spot, ahí empezamos un análisis que es mucho más que un cálculo matemático, que es mucho más que una media de toda la información, todos los datos que recibimos. Aquí solo para ejemplificar nuestro proceso. Bueno, tenemos la recolección de los datos y esta recolección es por teléfono, email, WhatsApp o reuniones presenciales, todo lo que sea posible para los analistas de Platts llegar a ustedes. Y a partir de estos datos en manos, empezamos a filtrar estos datos. Y este filtro es basado en las especificaciones preestablecidas por Platts y la industria cuando del lanzamiento del índice o de la encuesta. Y ahí cuando empezamos a filtrar estos datos, intentamos extinguir cualquier que sea los potenciales de manipulación, de distorsión de información, cualquier dato anómalo. Después de filtrar todo este dato, empezamos un análisis. Y sí, es un análisis muy subjetiva. Los analistas de Platts muy entrenados empiezan a mirar una tabla de Excel, prácticamente, analizar los datos y claro, sabemos que los datos, los números cuentan una historia. Entonces, cuando estamos mirando los datos, también tenemos en cuenta todo lo que escuchamos de la industria acerca de la oferta, de demanda, producción, todo lo que puede afectar los precios y si los números están ahí contando la misma historia que los participantes del mercado nos dijeron. Y algo importante en esta etapa es que cuando miramos todos los datos y hacemos este análisis, también buscamos el factor repetibilidad. Los números necesitan ser repetibles, porque ahí estamos buscando el valor transaccionable de aquella semana, de aquel día o de aquel mes. Y ahí, cuando estamos confidentes de este análisis, publicamos ahí estos precios en nuestras plataformas. Y bueno, lo que consideramos de datos. Cuando llamamos un participante del mercado, es como 1% de que recibimos las facturas. Esta es una cuestión que siempre recibo. Okay, ¿cómo sabes si las informaciones son verdaderas o no, si hay intenciones de manipulación o no? Bueno, como les dije, hacemos un análisis basado en todo, en la repetibilidad, en la confianza con la industria también, con algunas fuentes, y el factor repetibilidad es el principal. Bueno, pero consideramos las transacciones confirmadas, ofertas de compra, ofertas de venta, expresión de interés de compra o de venta. Cuando es solamente una expresión de interés, no se está manejando o no, claro que en ese sentido esta información será menos considerada que las demás. Indicaciones de valores claramente descritos como tal. Actividad transaccional escuchada, es cuando, bueno, no estoy manejando este producto, pero escuché algunas transacciones también, tiene un peso menor en la encuesta, y cualquier dato de mercado que sea pertinente al análisis de este producto, como les dijo, datos estadísticos de importación, de exportación y cualquier información de oferta y demanda. Algunas conclusiones. Bueno, para lograr transparencia en el índice Platts, como este índice de la varilla mexicana que todavía lanzamos, tendremos que alcanzar la mayor parte de participantes del mercado, y para lograr un nivel de transparencia y un nivel de calidad de este indicador necesitamos de la participación de ustedes. Varias compañías ya están participando, algunas formalmente, otras informalmente, pero estamos aquí para buscar que si tienes alguna duda, quieres saber un poco más de nuestra metodología, estamos a disposición, pero queremos sí la participación de ustedes. La precisión del índice depende de la calidad de las informaciones compartidas por el mercado. Y bueno, lo que escuchamos de ustedes también es que Platts necesita estar más cerca del mercado mexicano. Y sí, estamos atentos a eso. Abrimos recientemente una oficina en Santa Fe y estamos ahí contratando analistas para estar a cargo de las encuestas de México. Entonces estamos sí preocupados en estar más cerca del mercado mexicano, de estar más engajados en las reuniones con ustedes y para sanar cualquier duda que tienes. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Adriana. Señor Tolomeo, abrimos el espacio para preguntas y respuestas. Por ahí están nuestras edecanes con los micrófonos.
Es una pregunta general sobre los datos. ¿Se mantiene algún tipo de confidencialidad sobre las fuentes, de dónde provienen y demás, o es una encuesta abierta?
En este nivel en que tenemos el índice, que es un potencial benchmarks, sí tenemos confidencialidad de las fuentes, entonces todas las informaciones captadas por Platts son mantenidas en sigilo, no publicamos cuál compañía vendió a quién, pero cuando llegamos a un nivel de benchmark, por ejemplo, las compañías están totalmente abiertas a compartir sus informaciones con total transparencia. Si tienen en cuenta, por ejemplo, el IODEX, que es el índice para mineral de hierro en Platts, si están ahí suscritos a Platts, ven que las transacciones son nomeadas, sabemos el volumen de qué compañía, para cuál compañía, pero claro, este es el alto nivel de transparencia que quizás lleguemos algún día. Pero en este momento, las informaciones son mantenidas en sigilo, no compartimos las informaciones de cada compañía.
Pues me parece que eso es todo. Una vez más agradecemos al señor Tolomeo, a la señora Carvalho por su presentación. Permítanos, por favor, a manera de agradecimiento, obsequiarles un pequeño detalle elaborado por artesanas de la región del Tajín en Veracruz.